Let me start by thanking Senator Blumenthal for his focus on shining a light on this crypto corruption that's coming out of the White House. And they want to make sure that crypto corruption infects the entire country. And we have an obligation to make sure that doesn't happen. So thank you, Richard, for all of your efforts. I see we've been joined by Senator Durbin. I want to thank him as well for all he's doing on the Judiciary Committee and other forums. And thank all of you very much for being here. We look forward to the testimony. We know this is the most corrupt administration in American history. What I think not all Americans appreciate is that the crypto corruption is the lion's share of the corruption coming out of the Trump White House. As Senator Blumenthal said, President Trump has increased his net worth by $2.2 billion last year alone. $2.2 billion while Americans are struggling to make ends meet. And more than half of that, $1.4 billion of those profits come from crypto scams. Senator Blumenthal mentioned one of the major ones, which was this Trump memecoin. That individual we heard who got scammed was one of almost 1 million Americans who were taken advantage of by Donald Trump. In fact, about 1 million Americans lost $3.8 billion of their money to the Trump memecoin scam. And as Senator Blumenthal showed, the value of that meme coin kept going down and down. But the way President Trump makes his money is every trade. It can go up, it can go down, but he's like the house. He makes money whether people are winning or losing. And as we see, most people are losing while he's winning. Senator Blumenthal also mentioned that big party President Trump had at one of his local, estates. That was to pump the value because what it was a party for people who were the biggest investors in that time in his Trump meme coin. And a lot of people who bought it were foreign investors who simply wanted the opportunity to rub elbows with the President of the United States, literally selling the Oval Office and access to the President of the United States for his own personal profit. It's obscene and outrageous. The other big scam, as Senator Blumenthal mentioned, was the World Liberty Financial scam. So, as it turns out, right, the Sheikh Tahnoon's company, MGX, they essentially gave President Trump $500 million before he was even sworn in to buy a share of World Liberty Financial. And then when the president was going to the UAE, United Arab Emirates, he made clear that he was going to reduce the restrictions that the United States had placed on the transfer of very high-end chips and AI technology. He was going to lift the restrictions that had been put in place when the UAE royal family, Sheikh Tahnoon, who was the head of MGX, but also the head of G42, which is the company that was going to receive this valuable sensitive technology. They essentially invested $2 billion in World Liberty Financial, the Trump family stable coin. By the way, you probably read just last week that the professional staff at the Department of Commerce warned against transferring these very high-end chips to G42 because of their history of diffusion of sensitive technology to China. So here's the President of the United States pocketing hundreds of millions of dollars in profit by compromising our security. So this is very serious business. He's not just enriching himself, he's doing so at the expense of our security. And so I'm really glad you're all here because you would think that if we were going to pass a piece of legislation to regulate crypto, we would get at some of these issues. But the opposite is true. The so-called Clarity Act that Republicans have put forward actually would not address this issue. They want to make it look like it would address it, but I offered the amendment in the Banking and Housing Committee on the ethics issue. Every Republican at the time voted against it. And now we see their version of the ethics bill, which actually allows the president to continue this conflict of interest going forward. So it's a scam for the scammers. And on top of that, we also had, as Senator Blumenthal pointed out, a real problem with crypto being the currency of choice for all sorts of illicit transactions. So if you're a criminal enterprise, if you're a terrorist organization, if you're a rogue state like North Korea or Iran, crypto is your currency of choice, and they're actually making our vulnerability there worse, not better, by essentially making it clear that DeFi platforms are not subject to regulation. And then there's the lack of consumer protections. There's creating a whole nother sort of universe of investments, which will lead to regulatory arbitrage. There are lots and lots of issues. So I want to thank all of you for being here. I call this bill, the Clarity Bill, a bottom crawler, because what the crypto industry wants is for this to crawl along the bottom of the Senate and the Senate floor until they have the votes and pass it. And so we need to shine a light, as we're doing here today with your help, on what's happening, because the crypto industry right now, as we speak, has spent over $189 million of super PAC and other money in elections around the country for House and Senate to try to support and elect candidates that they believe will advance their interests at what I believe is at the expense of the public interest. So this is a really important moment. Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. I'm pleased to partner with you in this effort at this critical time.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you, Senator Van Hollen. I don't know whether, Senator Durbin, you'd like to make a couple of remarks.
I want to hear from the panel. Just say very briefly, Richard Nixon announced, "I am not a thief." Donald Trump is not wasting his breath or time to even make that assertion. We're living in the most corrupt presidency in the history of the United States. Teapot Dome was a little phrase that meant presidential corruption for decades. Cryptocurrency now means the kind of corruption that's going on today in a much, much different form. When I think of what we are faced with here, I beg my colleagues on the Democratic side of the aisle, don't join in on this. We shouldn't be part of this. We don't need our fingerprints at this crime scene. We should be standing for the kinds of things you're hearing today, ethical standards that take politicians out of the crypto game and really start regulating this industry once and for all. I thank you for this meeting.